Brilliant, I have it here. Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Andrew Ayres, as Sarah mentioned. I'm a Master Strategist at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and because I am a glutton for punishment, I'm also a part-time PhD student at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm extremely grateful to the organisers ITAG for having me here today to participate in this fantastic conference, to share the room and to share the stage with luminaries like Peter who preceded me. I'm extremely grateful. Last night when I arrived in Galway, a wave of calm and familiarity swept over me, owing not least to the fact that according to Ancestry.com, all of my ancestors, every single last one of them, hail from this beautiful corner of the world. I'm from Wigan in Greater Manchester originally, but I now live in Belfast with my wife, my teenage daughter, and a puppy who takes up far too much of my attention. My PhD studies are focused on the ways that large, complex organizations can govern the use of AI in their unique industry contexts. The inspiration came for this PhD on a bike ride. I probably just watched The Big Short or something. And my brain started to contemplate this idea that the people who are training the AI, the machine learning, are the investment bankers working with developers to bring them to life. Is there a risk that the biases, that the high-risk, high-reward mentality can become baked into the machine in indiscernible ways? That's what I'm looking to try and solve in my PhD studies. I've got 8 months now to write up. It's been a labor of love, but a very interesting one at that. And in my professional role and in my extracurricular and doctoral activities, I interface with, or have interfaced with, hundreds upon hundreds of senior IT leaders throughout EMEA, the US, and including the UK and Ireland. The vast majority of those IT leaders are now starting to really think about the ways that they can bring AI into their companies responsibly and in order to deliver value. Part of what I want to do today is share with you some of those insights so that we can perhaps address some of the inertia, some of the uncertainty, and move forward positively. While it's true that I work for HPE, I should say that some of the views that I share with you today are from Andrew, the privateer, the research student. I've long imagined having a vehicle for my research output called Polaris Insights, Polaris being the North Star, of course. And just yesterday evening, I asked ChatGPT to design a quick logo for me based on what the business did. And within 30 seconds, this is what it had come up with. It includes bits of constellation, bits of microchips here and there. I actually quite like it. Very clever. Today's theme is on data to intelligence. I actually believe, perhaps controversially, that data in and of itself is pretty dumb and pretty worthless until it's translated. And the role that AI can play in that translation is not to be underestimated. When we translate that data using things like AI, we're going to have the ability to see around corners, to make predictions, to create value for our organizations. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. What I'm not going to talk about is the rather wonderful AI origin story, the Turing, Dartmouth conference, all of that type of stuff. Nor am I going to focus in on the various branches of AI and ML that have emerged in recent decades, from the narrow AI to artificial general intelligence and beyond that to superintelligence. There's bookshelves and digital resources for you to almost drown yourself in if you're so inclined. What I might do is share with the organizers my top 10 summer reads, real AI page turners. And what will probably not be on it is this EU policy and legal frameworks for artificial intelligence, robotics and related technologies tome that will get people looking at you very strangely round a swimming pool, I would have thought. So, if you look at the IT press, and if you look at any press for that matter, AI has become ubiquitous. It's imbued in almost every aspect now, in some way, of our personal and professional lives, from the narrow AI that is embedded within the music and video streaming services that we no doubt love and use every day, to the nudge capabilities that are part of our banking apps that tell us that, hey, calm it on Starbucks this month, you've got some bills coming out in a few days. And also the explosion of generative AI, fueled by large language models, Bing, Gemini, ChatGPT. All of these capabilities, whether narrow or whether based on generative AI, are driven by masses of data, coupled with huge computational might, all brought together to enhance our life and our work in some way. At least that's the hope. But given AI's omnipresence then, there's also a lot of hype and white noise that surrounds it. We've got to cut through this hype and white noise to determine what signals should we pay attention to and which should we dismiss as just hype and distraction. Peter talked about the attempts by certain companies to predict the future, and one of the culprits of trying to do that is Gartner. This is their hype cycle for artificial intelligence for 2023. It's updated this July, updated once a year. For those of you not familiar with this visual construct, it places AI and its multifarious use cases on a left-to-right continuum based on their maturity, based on their embeddedness, and their perceived value. We can easily put this diagram to the test, because what it should show is that on the right-hand side, we've got a lot of awareness of the nodes that are on the diagram, and towards the left, there might be things that we've not heard of. Can I ask you, please, if you're able to describe what an autonomous vehicle is, please raise your hands. Come on, more of you know. More of you know than that. All right. Keep them raised if you could confidently describe what artificial general intelligence really is. Okay, hands dropping. And who amongst you could describe articulately what neurosymbolic AI is? Okay, probably not many. And that's the reason why it's on the left here. These are the very, very early stage ideas. They start to clamber up this peak, the peak of inflated expectations. As they reach the top, that's when everybody starts talking about them, thinking about the ways that they could be used, maybe even worrying about them. When people realize that actually that's going to be way too expensive for us to think about, it's not going to deliver value in our context, they slide down into the trough of disillusionment. Okay? And only the use cases that really meet true organizational and personal needs start to climb again the slope of enlightenment to the plateau of productivity. This is the survival of the fittest AI edition. Okay? And the broad array of nodes on this diagram demonstrate the vastness of AI as a topic. It has multiple facets to it, myriad use cases, different levels of maturity, and I think that overall it's worthy of the attention it gets, and it's something that we should get excited about. But as Sarah said, rather like Geoffrey Hinton, there are utopians and dystopian thinkers amongst us. There's a usefulness to that. I should declare myself as being probably just towards the dystopian end of the spectrum, just over the halfway mark. I'm not a doomer, nor am I a happy clapper who thinks about AI unquestioningly. Healthy skepticism, you see, allows us to hold ourselves to account, not be seduced by some of the hype that surrounds AI. It allows us to move forward, eyes wide open, and to think about the ways that this technology could actually work for us. I'm not one of these people that thinks we should slow down or stop development in AI. Quite the contrary. Where we ready ourselves for it properly, where we get it right, it will be perhaps our greatest invention. But where we get it wrong, it could well become our final invention. A sobering thought indeed. But wherever you sit on this continuum of utopian to dystopian, there's a need to concentrate right away on a common denominator. And that common denominator is data. Data is the absolute bedrock of AI. And it's something that we can all get on with today. It's the focus of this talk. And there's a magic equation, probably not all that magic at all, really, that I think is useful for us as we think about what we need to do to get AI right. In the brackets, data plus people plus process. Okay? I put them in brackets because the actual order that you attack these things in is open probably to some interpretation, but I would argue that you need to attack those things first. The eagle-eyed amongst you might say, hang on a minute, we can use technology to cleanse our data. Yes, you can. So I include within those brackets the enabling technologies around data, people, and process. What I'm talking about in AI technology is specifically that. And when you handle the things well within the brackets, and when you combine those things with some of the fantastic technologies that are now coming onto the market, you're in better shape to drive real AI success. If you remember one thing from my talk today, let it be to think of this equation in all of your conversations about AI. Reject the sense, and this might sound weird from somebody who works at a global technology company, but reject the sense that this is a pure technology play. It just isn't. It's not what big tech marketing departments want you to believe. If you miss these variables in the magic equation, if you look to shortcut this process, you do so at your peril. And as companies have found, you might pay the price later in some way, somehow. And there have been some eye-catching events and misfires that have resulted from neglecting some or all of these steps as AI has been rolled out. One example is the flash crash that a trading algorithm precipitated back in 2010. It wiped billions of dollars in value from the US stock market. Why? Poor data quality, the incorrect algorithmic instruction, and inadequate risk assessment. Identity crisis here refers to the misidentification of people in criminal proceedings. Again, the algorithm, the machine, wrongly identifying people, accusing them of crimes, leading to miscarriages of justice. And driverless cars, perhaps a more obvious one. We start giving those things the wrong data and the wrong instruction. It can be risky, worse. It can be worse than risky for sure. All of these things have happened because somewhere somebody rushed towards a technology decision. But the advancement of technology now magnifies and amplifies even the smallest of errors in the code, in the data. All of that can be detrimental to organizations. There are regulators waiting to make examples of large firms to deter others and to drive better standards in the way that AI is rolled out. There are also no shortage of armchair commentators that are ready to pounce on companies that have done something wrong, that's garnered public opinion. The commentary on social media is enough to stop people buying your products and services, visiting your facility, whatever it might be. So there's a real need to focus on the fundamentals here. Renowned AI scholar, UC Berkeley professor, Stuart Russell, describes in his now very famous artificial intelligence textbook that we need to focus on something that he calls the percept. The percept is the basis for all the machine knows about the world, everything it knows. And it's gifted to the machine by its human masters. They select the data. They provide the algorithmic instruction that dictates the way that the machine operates. Humans still play a very, very powerful role in the genesis of and the operation of artificial intelligence. But AI is still only as good as the percept, as the training, as the data that is given. Therefore, data is training, and training is data. Machine learning technologies ingest, remodel, and recycle data in an infinite loop. They draw inferences. They make suggestions for us to act upon. This places the percept rather, as the fulcrum on which all of AI rests. What's funny to me, however, is that AI has overtaken big data in the technology conversation. Once upon a time, all of the magazines and newspapers would talk about big data. Now they don't. They all talk about AI. I think that switch has happened somewhat immaturely. I think it's too early to take big data out of the conversation because, if we're being honest, we never really mastered it. And there's a risk that in the euphoria of AI, we forget about it. The old adage that you should not run before you can walk holds true here. You know what I think of data on its own, dumb and worthless. We need to translate it more powerfully. We can update our equation now to say that it's the right data. In the hands of skilled people who are enacting sound, very well considered processes, coupled with the right enabling and specific AI technologies that leads to success. This is where the magic happens. This is where the metamorphosis takes place, when data finally becomes more than the sum of its parts, when it becomes insight. It's very much more easy said than done. If you take the example of a typical firm or organization, be it a long-established bank, a public sector body, an engineering firm, all of them, decade by decade, have amassed a huge data corpus, okay? Made up of visual data, textual data, numerical data, and a mixed bag of all data. And it's spread all about the place. It is nestled within the shadowy recesses of the organization, where it's very easy to overlook. It's an amorphous blob that people think about sometimes and then think, I don't want to touch that this week. It's too difficult to tackle. But the future is bright for the people who tackle the tough stuff head on. And the first tackle that we need to make, the first step on the journey from data to intelligence, is to get our data in shape. First, we've got to find it. We've got to flush it out from where it currently sits. Good, bad, or ugly, it really doesn't matter. We've then got to analyze it against our organizational imperatives. Whatever your organization is trying to do, that's the way that you need to analyze it. We need to rationalize it too, so that we're only concentrating on the bits we need to concentrate on, because it's very easy for our minds and our attention to become fogged with stuff that doesn't warrant our attention. We've then got to elevate that best data to the organizational conscience. We've got to then take it and build models from it. The stuff we don't need, we can archive because it's either not useful or we don't need to keep it for legal reasons. Set it aside. The good stuff, we monetize it. If we're not profit-seeking, we ideate from it. We build models from it. Once you reach this stage, you're well on the way to harnessing that data to intelligence continuum. And there's no better tool than AI for this type of work if you've got your house in order. But habitually, obsessively even, we've got to now rerun these steps over and over and over to refine the data that we have. We do not want our data stores to feel like my iCloud account, just full of stuff that I just don't want to think about this week, okay? Because that is a recipe for disaster. There's a petabyte explosion, some would say an exabyte explosion at the edge now due to the proliferation of connected devices on the factory floor, on the wards, in retail environments, wherever it may be, constantly gathering data. I saw something recently that said the London terror attacks, they generated a few gig of data. Now, recent similar examples are taking many, many terabytes of data. And that kind of paints that point that data is growing. A fresh influx of data is just part of our business as usual now. It's like death and taxes. If we don't master these steps, we're not going to ready ourselves for the AI revolution in the right way, because essentially we haven't yet got our house in order. A Gartner colleague that I used to work with called this type of stuff lipstick on a digital pig, okay, which has stuck in my head for some reason. So let's scan forward. You've got to get your data into shape. You defined the ways that you want to extract value from it. Now what? Well, now we can bring the intelligence piece to bear. Now it's time to talk about how we can use AI. And that's because AI feeds upon data. It must be nourished on good data. Who remembers this film? Super Size Me, Morgan Spurlock. He ate nothing but McDonald's for a year. I mean, blimey. Did he die? No, he didn't die. Did physicians tell him to stop doing what he was doing because his internal organs were affected? Yes, they told him to stop right away. Think about this analogy when you're feeding the AI. It holds the best, most nourishing data, drives model fitness in the same way that a good diet drives our fitness and our health. That's the way that we're going to make AI pay dividends for us and our organizations. It's not just health, remember? You saw the risks that can happen when we get it wrong too. And AI will eat bad data until the cows come home. It will never raise its hand and say, I'm good there, thank you. It will keep taking it from you, taking it from you, taking it from you, and worryingly, using all of it too. Not too bad in rules-based context that we have today. Algorithms are just steps, after all. We can look to see if something goes wrong, where it might have gone wrong, where it took the wrong path, and we can get in there, we can take a look at it, and we can remediate it. They're not so completely black box that we can't arrest problems that we see and fix them. It still might be costly, but it might just not be devastatingly costly. That's the difference. But as AI and machine learning become more and more intelligent, as the levels of autonomy that we assign to machines increases, as we delegate more tasks to machines, the negative impacts of bad data become unthinkable, literally unthinkable. And this is because when machine learning gets hold of bad data, it mines it and it reconstitutes it in novel ways. The inner workings of machine learning I found in my doctoral studies, they move beyond the temporal understanding of human beings, i.e., the humans struggle to understand what is going on within that machine learning technology. They can't describe it clearly, and that's a problem. There was an example, a famous example of a chatbot called Tay. 2 instances of the chatbot were set up to chat to each other, and happily did they begin their conversation. What a wonderful success. Until, gradually, over time, they started to talk to each other about very strange and offensive and deeply biased content. They then started to talk to each other in a language that the programmers could not understand the origins of. That's a chatbot. It's in a controlled sandbox environment, worrying but controlled. We start to bring that technology without due care and attention into our banks, into our pharmaceutical companies, into our hospitals. The challenges with that, well, challenges is too light a term. It becomes very scary indeed. And no technology, not even HPE technology, I should add, can compensate for bad data and bad planning. We've got to start thinking differently. Peter talked about philosophy in his talk earlier today. This is a lady called Professor Catherine Hales. She's a prominent US scholar in the scintillating areas of postmodernism and new materialism. She specializes in particular in studying the intersection between the human and material world. Her work forces us to think of artificial intelligence, and you're a smart crowd, but bear with me here. She wants us to think of it as a socio-technical, cognitive assemblage. An assemblage made up of humans and machines, extending our carbon bodies into the silicon matter of machines. It's quite a mind-bending topic. Again, a difficult summer read for many of you. So when we're presiding over such an important assemblage, it's absolutely critical that we do so responsibly. We've got to get the nourishment right. We've got to get the processes right. The technology is now waiting there for us. There are some phenomenal things that are being done around large language models, around supercompute. It's there, it's waiting for us. But let's give that technology the data that it really wants, and not just the data that we've got right now. On that point, responsible, ethical, explainable AI is becoming a huge concern. This whole book, actually, save you reading it, focuses on the EU guidelines around AI. It talks about what companies should do based on the level of risk that a particular AI platform might have, whether it's a high risk, medium risk, or low risk. But other jurisdictions have taken different approaches, from the probably quite punitive measures that the United States might try to drive to the softer, it seems, measures of the UK and what Rishi Sunak has decided to do around this. Despite the different approaches that are being taken, what the regulators want is for us to hold open the lid on the black box of AI and make it possible for them to peek inside. Make it possible for them to look at the architecture, the data pathways. Make it possible for them to understand in what ways are humans involved in this process. In what ways are you governing, documenting this process? How are you making AI safe? On the data front, it's about establishing clear lines of data governance. It's about cleansing and profiling the data so that you get rid of those abilities for it to focus on the wrong stuff, misidentify the wrong people, whatever it might be. Also, implement bias detection so that you can very quickly remove some of the ghosts in the machine, some of the nasties that could be embarrassing or worse for you if they still remain in there. And obviously, version control and testing is of paramount importance too. Performing all these checks and balances is very tough. To support this, your data, the critical data workloads, remember, that you've elevated to the conscious of the organization, they need to be accessible at lightning speed. Here, the people and applications that use that data must be able to do so very quickly. They must be able to do so imperceptibly fast, because that allows for the development of guardrails. It forms the bridge to the technology decisions that you need to make to translate your data to intelligence. You have to make data the preeminent organizing principle from which many of your other decisions rest around infrastructure, around AI, around people, in order to make it pay for you. Doing so, of course, impacts the type of technology decisions that you need to make as an organization, because you want your data to be close at hand in a location where latency is expressed in milliseconds and where application ecosystem dependencies can be supported. A lot of the companies that I work with, for very good reason, have made their first forays into the public cloud, for instance, using hyperscale infrastructure, using other people's computers. And it makes a lot of sense. The public cloud has inspired a lot of the work that we now do at HPE. It's revolutionized IT in many ways. But as a display of data's potency and power in relation to AI, data is forcing the hand of companies to think again, willing them to ask the question, what is the right location for our data to be in, given the regulatory backdrop, given what we need to do to it in order to drive value from it. Companies are now starting to repatriate data and workloads from the public cloud, bringing it closer at hand so that it can be more easily manipulated and governed. There's an ease about the public cloud that, again, if we're not careful, it could become another holding bay for applications and data that we've not, that we want, off our native infrastructure and put somewhere else, frankly. So good habits and strong discipline, then, are essential if you're going to master the data to intelligence continuum, if you're going to leverage the power of organizations, of AI in your organizations in the future. So in summary, what I've wanted to convey to you today is that yes, artificial intelligence is hugely exciting. It deserves the attention that it gets. We are growing up around it. We are working with it every day, benefiting from it, and we're extremely fortunate to be a part of its journey, of its own development. But if we sit back because we think that the boundless advances that are being made are going to do all of the hard work for us, if we rest on our laurels, because let's face it, humans can be sometimes quite lazy in that regard, then we're misguided. We're not going to be able to drive optimum value from it. We're going to open ourselves up to risks. So we have to follow the equation that I set out earlier. We have to make sure that our AI journeys are fruitful and beneficial, that we don't just leap towards the technology and forget everything else. It simply will not work. With that thought, I will leave you. Thank you a great deal for your attention this morning. It's an absolute privilege to have spoken to you today, and I look forward to meeting many of you in the breaks and addressing the questions which I think are going to take place on the panel instead of at the end of this talk. So thanks a million, everybody, and see you later.